This world was not built by random bricks of chance. A blind God is not destiny's architect. A conscious power has drawn the plan of life. There is a meaning in each curve and line. Good evening, everyone. I accord a very warm welcome to Dr. Alok Pandey, who has been steering us through his very insightful sessions for the past few months. The extremely relevant and profound topics taken up for deliberation have provided us with a lot of food for thought and personal growth. It seems by design that today's session coincides with the birth anniversary of one of India's greatest spiritual leaders, Swami Vivekananda. The day is observed as the National Youth Day. Swamiji said, and I quote, "When the world is the end and God is the means to attain that end, that is material. When God is the end and the world is only the means to attain that end, spirituality has begun. There is no other teacher but your own soul." Spirituality, he believed, is the science of the soul. The theme for today's session is psychic and spiritual education, the missing piece of the puzzle. We look forward to this very intriguing session. Over to you, Dr. Pandey.
Namaste. The missing piece of the human puzzle, that is the subject for today. And the purpose of this particular sharing is, the purpose is to find the purpose. Education, very often when we refer to education, education is to bring out the highest and the best within us and to put it at the service of the noblest part in us, that part which is at the highest. So, as of now, we focus on bringing out that which is the best, whatever maximum possible within the human limits. Right now, education is focused too much upon development of the faculties of the mind, mostly faculties of the mind, and they are also largely faculties of the left brain. The right brain remains almost untouched. As somebody has said, the left has nothing right in it and the right has nothing left in it. It's a civilizational disease that the stress is almost entirely on the analytical parts of the brain. But apart from the brain, we human beings have a heart. At least we are supposed to have a heart. But the heart in the process of development of the mind-centric education is suppressed. And when we actually land up in real life, we face a strange dilemma because the mind, by its nature, categorizes, dockets things, judges, labels. It divides in a way. That's how its ways is of understanding life. Whereas the heart, by its nature, unites. Heart is the power that brings people together, forces together. So what we miss is the uniting element in life. And then, of course, the life parts, the physical, more or less completely neglected. So by the time we come out of a school or even a college, we have certain faculties or capacities that are developed, which happens through the process of schooling and college. We also are given a certain kind of way of living life depending on the parents. If the parents are traditional, they have a certain culture, then we are taught that, conform to these customs, these traditions, these values. Some of them also instill in the child moral values. And then if they don't have a culture, then the child is left to, his own to explore. So he picks up from the society, he picks up from everything that is going around, he picks up from fashion, from peer pressure and everything. And therefore he becomes kind of directionless, not knowing where he should go. And with regard to heart, he does not know how to relate. He doesn't know how to relate even with the person next door to him. Why next door? Even with the person living with him. He doesn't know how to relate to plants, to animals, to Mother Earth. So it's an education which is actually a great poverty. And even if we were to develop all these capacities, ultimately the question arises, who is the user of these faculties, these capacities? So other day there was a very interesting discussion that I was reading or I chanced upon, that which dhanush was better, bow. So there is talk about Gandhi of Arjuna, there is talk about Vijay Dhanush of Karna, or there is talk about Ravana, he had the Dhanush right from Lord Shiva. But see, the interesting part is that it's not the Dhanush which made them win the victory. In the great battlefield of life, what made Arjuna the victor was not his bow. Of course, he had a celestial bow, he earned it, he had, it has its own story. But it was the one who was driving his chariot, Sri Krishna. All others, they had powerful bows, all given by great celestial beings. And if you really go into the history of Arjuna's bow, it is not something as celestial as, Ravana receiving a sword which has been given by none else but the great God. But that did not ensure the victory. So when we enter into the field of life, we don't know what is our purpose. Normally, we are told that you have this job to do, and this job we choose based on our ambition, our puny goals. I use the word puny goals because it's like wealth, it's like what position you'll occupy. So this is all, and we put all these faculties at the service of very puny aims. This is the mistake that we see which was done in Atlantis. This was the mistake done in Troy. This was the mistake done in the Maya civilization. This was the mistake done in Lanka, and we know how it collapsed. It collapsed because the faculties were developed, the capacities were developed, but the aim was small. So when we talk about psychic and spiritual education, we touch upon the aim of human life, the purpose of human existence. So what really is the same, and where is it to be found? So children go to career counseling. Now we must know the difference between career and an aim. Career is itself a means, an instrument. And I've spoken about it, I think, in previous or some other subject. So we'll not touch upon that so much in detail. But the aim is something which we are meant to be. Aim is something which has been, it's like a purpose planted in the heart of every human being. And over a period of time, actually it is not even in one life. It is a purpose planted originally, right when the one became many. In each of these units, he planted a purpose. That purpose is like a seed which unfolds itself through lives, through the journey in space and time. It develops, blossoms. For a long time, one doesn't know it. So if you look at a soil outside before the seeds have sprouted, the plants have come to the surface. If you ask an ignorant person what is below the soil, he'll not know. He'll probably analyze the surface of the soil and say something. But the farmer knows that he has planted a seed of this kind, and that has to come. And as we know, each seed requires a certain kind of, special process, special environment, a special climate. Now this seed, which is called as a purpose, is embedded in the psychic being. So psychic being is that part in us which has entered into the play of space and time. It carries the seed throughout, from life to life. In one course of one lifetime, this seed sprouts a little, then another lifetime it sprouts a little, until a time comes when we can be actually born with a conscious mission and a conscious purpose. That's when the psychic being has arrived at its full development. But even before that, especially in children who are not yet conditioned with all the ideas of adulthood that, you have to do this job, you have to, from 3 years of age, what this child will become, somebody else starts determining, puts it into our head. So by the time we grow into adulthood, we lose this. But this is our original script, and in many children who are uncorrupted, undefiled by all these kind of pressures, by the time they are 7, 8, 9, they will say something, or their behavior, this seed will show up. In the Gita, it's very beautifully termed as Swabhava and Swadharma, something which is inbuilt within the very fabric of the soul. It is our true nature, our soul nature. And it's our purpose, and the purpose of parents and the purpose of educators to bring it out. We are like a gardener. So the seed has been planted by the divine. Our purpose is to bring out that seed. But we are too impatient, and we just bring an artificial tree from somewhere and put it over the seed which is sprouting. The result is something which is, you know, exact, something which is perfect in its performance, but something which is artificial and false. So this is something we see on the Pondicherry beach every day. I go around and remember, see, they have brought khajur ka ped from I don't know where. They've transplanted it. I don't know whose brilliant idea is this, but it may look nice, but it's not true. It doesn't go with, that's not how you expect a wonderful seashore to be with these planted ped. Now, this is something what happens with us, that the seed gets buried because we pick up a seemingly nice, beautiful tree and put it on the soil, which is not meant for it. There is another seed which is to sprout, and that gets buried and stifled. So, psychic education deals with the effort to bring out this divine purpose, the divine will in its unfolding within the individual. And this unfolding is in terms of space and time. To put it very simply, it is what we are meant to do. Not from the point of view of the world, from society, from others, but we are programmed for that. And that's the mission of our life is to, fulfill it. I am reminded of both these stories of Sri Aurobindo and Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda's birth anniversary today. Now look at Swami Vivekananda. That, at a young age, he's a brilliant student in Presidency College, and he is touched, but his innate spiritual search, he goes to Sri Ramakrishna, and then he's touched by him. And he abandons all of that and takes to a life which is, at his point of time, I'm sure there must have been a lot of resistance. In fact, his mother and sister went through a lot of poverty. We know that. And yet, look at the conscious purpose behind him. Truly a sign of a developed human being. This is what I'm meant to do, and this is what I'm going to do. What a steadfast will. Everybody, I'm sure, would have told him, this is a wrong choice you are making. Your career doesn't lie here. You can become a wonderful chemist in Bengal, chemical college, and you can do this. You can earn a lot of money. Maybe you can go abroad. Well, he did go abroad, but he didn't go to abroad to pick up something. He went to abroad to give something which became of perennial importance. So look at this one life, which is an example of what true education should be. That at a point of time, he realizes this is my purpose. And he abandons everything for the pursuit of this purpose. Look at another life, Sri Aurobindo. Now, here is his parents sending him to, UK so that he becomes a perfect English gentleman, because that's what he felt, that after all, indoctrinated, still we are indoctrinated. Though in Sri Aurobindo's life, at least this much we can learn, that we can be ourselves. But his father, though a very wonderful human being, noble person, but he was indoctrinated like that, a really superior race. So he's sent there to become a perfect English gentleman. And with his capacities, he performs very well. And then his father must have had a great expectation that he must do ICS and become a very big officer, collector or something like that. And Sri Aurobindo, discovering the purpose within that, this is not what I'm meant to do. Though the full purpose unfolded, though even as a child, if you read his poem at 10 years of age, if you read his play at 18 years of age, so we'll see that there is a purpose which is shining through the layers. But at a crucial time, he fails to present himself in the ICS writing test. Though he has cleared the theory, he deliberately drops it. And then we know that Oscar Browning requests again that, no, you go. And second time a chance is given, but he fails to turn up or show up. Now, this is the difference between a person who is pursuing conventional education and the person who is conscious in the psychic, being conscious in the soul. So these are two very clear examples that though it was not like they were entering into spiritual life because they couldn't do anything better. There are very often people say, oh, acha, he has gone to an ashram. Why? I remember once when in Delhi, so I was married and, on holiday, my wife had come along with our son to, just spend 15 days there. So one of the persons who was my patient, Air Commodore retired, and he was very impressed that he's interested in spiritual life. One day he came searching for me in the mess, and saw my wife sitting outside. So all, normal attire of any other, up-to-date woman. And he asked her, "Oh, who are you?" She introduced herself. So he says, "You're Mrs. Pandey." "Yes, I'm Mrs. Pandey." "Oh." Then she said, "Why? What is the surprise?" He said, "Why did then he take to spiritual life?" I'm telling you a real life story. The idea was that one has to be terribly disappointed in, material life. One has to, have a wife or husband who is not good. One has to have a failure in career. One's son may have, deceived. One may have been cheated by friend. Then you turn to spiritual life. Well, such a disappointment. It's not out of failure. It's not that, I couldn't do anything in life, therefore I must take to. It's because you discover that there is something infinitely greater than all that we can discover within this frame. So there are people who are happy within the frame, people who want to go beyond the frame. So there are two aspects of this education. One is within the frame, there is something I am meant to do as an expression of that which is beyond the frame. This is a greater truth. And that is unfolding. Now, within the frame, I may take up this work, that work. Each of us does a field of work. But it should be determined by that which serves my mission and my purpose. So when we look at Sri Aurobindo's life, Swami Vivekananda's life, they both were one of the greatest outpourings of work, which is unimaginable. I often give this example that Swami Vivekananda in 39 years did something which people, if they live for 390 years, won't be able to achieve. And Sri Aurobindo at 78 had opened a whole new age for mankind. It's unimaginable. So why did they do it? Because they lived the very purpose. So this is what should be the purpose of psychic education, to discover this purpose which each one is meant to be. Otherwise, very often, even this is transplanted. So when you ask people often ask what is, or in a typical setting where you have, people who are exposed to writings of mother, or, they have read something about spiritual life, and you ask the children, so what is the purpose of life? They say, to find the divine. Now, it's not like that. it's not parroting what really we mean by divine. Because even when we use the word divine, we are normally drawn to one aspect or the other. To somebody, it's a divine means justice; to another person, truth; to somebody else, love. What I mean by this is that this approach of discovering the purpose need not be religious, though very often it takes a religious feeling. People who are bound or who are destined to discover it, very often in them this discovery is associated with what mother calls as a mystical or religious feeling. So they suddenly go to a place, usually it's, a temple setting, or maybe near a lake, or sometimes, watching an ocean, or they go to a mountain. Suddenly they are overwhelmed with a mystic feeling. So this mystic feeling may take place in a particular place in a temple, or it may be just a setting. I remember 1st of January in one of my Air Force places where 31st December there is a party and I didn't go. And early morning I woke up because everybody was asleep, and morning when I woke up and I saw the sun shining through the trees, and I still remember the aha moment. I can't describe what I felt, but I felt this is divine. Something like that. It was something tremendous. And, that was a time when I really was still going through a phase of agnosticism, but it was like a concrete experience looking at the sun coming through the trees. So usually this purpose starts by giving the sense of a religious or a mystic feeling. It's different from ritualistic religion. One may follow ritualistic religion all one's life, but may be very far from anything called spiritual. I mean, some of the asuras are very religious. They go to the temple every day. They, do all these things. But so it's a feeling that one has to discover within, and it's like a little ray which touches one and then passes, goes into the background. Most children experience it. Sometimes, they'll suddenly say, "Oh, ultimately there is love." Now, or sometimes they say, "No, I want to know truth." Very often, it can take that form. Even it doesn't matter about even whether we believe in God or not. This feeling will declare itself in the form of something like a tremendous idea. For example, I have seen children who may not believe in God, but they are moved by this idea of truth. What is the truth of life? Now, that is what is taking us towards that great disclosure. I still remember one of the talks in one of the schools when an 11th standard girl told me, "Sir, I'm very touched, but problem is that I don't believe in God." So I said, okay, which God you don't believe in? She said, a God who punishes and rewards. I said, good, we are on the same page. I also don't believe in such a God. So I asked her, what kind of God you would like to believe in, if at all? She said, a God who is all loving and compassionate. I said, again, we are on the same boat. So the problem is not about God, it's about our conception. So this is an area which is completely missing in our education. Hardly it is even spoken of, let alone practiced. On the other hand, before we come to psychic education back again, on the other hand, spiritual education actually implies that there is constant upward movement. We are as if in a mighty current. I remember one of these things I had read about Swami Vivekananda, which was so powerful. He said, we are being led forward by a mighty current. And I imagined the ocean where, whether we like it or not, we are led forward. We may play at cross purposes with this mighty current and feel very bad because it'll hit us. We want to go to the shore and this mighty current is carrying us upward. Shubhda speaks of this. There is a mighty law of life. There is a truth, Sanatan Dharma, and it's carrying us forward and forward in the evolutionary march of mankind. So spiritual education teaches us that the mind is not the limit. There is something greater than the mind. And one of the best ways to do it, simplest ways, that after we have taught a subject, that illusion that I know it, is to make the child be quiet for a while and say, now tell what is not yet known. Now you see the answer. It's something amazing. I remember one mathematics teacher he was in the ashram, and he was narrating an incident where in his class he would draw, this is straight line, this is triangle, this is... And then at the end he will say, but all this is one. He will show it in a very simple way that there is one little line. You can flex it, you can curve it, but behind it all there is one. This sense of the one can be so overpowering that behind everything there is one, that one consciousness. Until we discover it, we are yet very far from the ultimate discovery. So while psychic education is about expressing the divine will within time and space, through the frames of mind, body and life. Mind, body and life are instruments and we must develop it. But who is the user of this, this bow and arrow? Whereas spiritual education is about going beyond the mind, right from form into the realms of formlessness. Whereas psychic education is within forms. Thoughts are forms, feelings are forms, life energies, it can take forms, institutions are forms, body is a form. But it is the formless essence of things. For instance, beauty. Beauty can be in form, beauty can be beyond form. Truth. Truth in form is lost in definitions and information. But there is a formless truth. So the moment we strive to go beyond the world of forms into the formless, we are engaging with spiritual education. Of course, beyond that, there is a third education which the mother speaks about, and that is supramental education. She says, psychic and spiritual education take up the lead of nature. It's like nature climbing upward, step by step by step. So, in psychic education, we discover what is behind mind, life, and body. In spiritual education, we want to know what are the highest reachings of nature within us. How far can nature climb? Faculties, capacities. We see in, Savitri, in the greater mind, which goes beyond the rational mind. But in supramental education, it is a change of nature. Nature itself would change under the pressure of something which comes from above and right up to the most material base. So now we come back to psychic education, which is the missing piece of the puzzle to find the purpose of life. How do we start with it? Several hints she has given. Each of them is a hint. But first we speak about the atmosphere. What is the atmosphere in which the soul will blossom? The psychic is that part in us which we vaguely use the word as soul. But it develops over a period of time and becomes a psychic personality, assumes a psychic personality. Psychic personality is different from the what we call as personality, which is mind, vital, and the body. Now, we must have an atmosphere for this to develop. And the atmosphere in which psychic develops. One, it must be something harmonious, beauty, harmony, love, and truth. These are essential ingredients. So a house where there is a constant quarrel, a house where all the time you have all these kinds of, all kinds of parties and, all kinds of disharmonious things, frictions all the time, loud music, where love is missing. So there, the psychic cannot develop. This one part, atmosphere. Love and truth, most important. Then harmony. Even if you hear music, it should be harmonious, not loud and discordant, jarring notes. So all these things are detrimental. It's like poisoning. We have the story of Shri Krishna where he is a child and he's poisoned. Kansa sends Putana to poison him. So what does Putana do? She assumes the form of Yashodama. It's very unfortunate that in our real life, many a mothers play the role of Putana, parents. Because what do? They basically make the child have poison and think they are giving Amrit. It's done with goodwill. All our anxieties, we pass through the milk. And therefore, by the time the child grows up, the seed is so badly entangled, as Christ said so beautifully, when he was asked that you are telling so many beautiful things all over, do people value? So he gave a very beautiful example. He said, I am like a farmer and I throw seeds. Some soils are hard rock, nothing will enter into it. So you may talk at the end, maybe the person will listen, and then look left, right, take out the cell phone and say, you know what, I am little busy, and then after going, don't know what this fellow is talking about. Then some are so porous that whatever goes, it will not take roots. Oh, you said very nice, fantastic, but nothing will come out because there is no will at all. On one side, there is such an obstinate, rigid cover that it won't allow spiritual light to percolate. On the other side, the will is so weak that the talks and readings and whatever we read from these great ones sounds very good. They are like seeds, but the soil there is no will and determination to allow it to take roots. Says then sometimes the soil is ready, 1 in 1,000. It's exactly what Shri Krishna says in the Gita. Manushya naam sahasrenu. Out of thousands, one is a seeker of perfection. Here and there. So where the soil is ready and the seed falls. But even there as it comes out, it is, surrounded by bushes, it gets entangled or it's eaten by animals. But in one odd case, it develops and that is enough to justify the entire labor. Now look at us as educationists, all of us in some way or the other, we are all engaged in education. Even if we are not teachers, we are engaged in education. How many times we can say that in our lifetime, somebody came out with this beautiful blossoming of the soul within? We are very happy and proud. A student from my school, very often you'll see in PMT list, pre-medical test for those who may not know. Engineering test, you have advertisement, no? These are my top ones who have got into engineering, who have got into medicine. What happens after that? I know in my own college somebody who had done very well, breaking all records. At the end of the day, he was nothing but a person who was selfishly accumulating money and money and money. So what is the point of all this? What did I create? As an educationist, I created an asura, a rakshasa, a glutton. I didn't create a godlike being who would have cared for the world around, who would have cared for life around, who would cared for his own highest good. So this is one part, that we must create an atmosphere which should be conducive to this. And the second is, just like every part in us needs food, the psychic also needs food. Poor fellow is deprived. Why? Whole day, days after days, it's something or the other, either, cell phone or programs or internet or all kinds of discussions. But where is psychic food? Now at least I come from a generation where I'm not sounding like an old man, okay? Pretty young, in spirit at least. But I came from a household and generation where we were fed the psychic milk. That time I didn't know what it means. But every day morning I saw my dad get up in the morning, do puja, regardless of whatever time he came back from duty. Every time I heard these stories from Ramayana and Mahabharata and heard those, artis, they did something which was wonderful. I mean, when I look back, now I see this was the greatest gift someone could do to me. Simple thing, children are not even taught to pray. By taught, I don't mean a parrot-like prayer that do this, bhujanga shanam. Not like that. That's okay. But the idea that there is a vastness, an infinity, to whom you can just pray, or even when you say the traditional verse, You can think of him as the great being. Explain to a child, look at, the majesty of the great being who is, above the cosmic waters, sleeping on infinite time. And time is unfolding at his will. He's in the core and the heart. Depending on the age, it can be explained. And then when they have that vision, and then they say, Shantakaram Bhujanga Shayanam. So why Shantakaram? Because, vastness makes us peaceful. Narrowness and limitation. Bhujanga Shayanam, sleeping on the coils of time. We are slaves of time. He is the origin of time. He determines time. So when we start looking at life, this is what gives the psychic food. So there are plenty of stories. We must understand, psychic education is not moral education. Moral education has its place. It's a substitute. Sometimes, like our good and virtue, a poor substitute. As Sri Aurobindo says, a coarse, ill-fitting, badly spun dress. So when we don't have the psychic education, when we don't know what is the dharma within, then we need moral education. Moral education is do this, don't do this, make life cut into columns of black and white. But these things don't actually, it's helpful so that we don't swing to, restrains in us the titan and the god. It's good to restrain us from excessive or any kind. But psychic education will tell us the unfolding of the truth within me at a given point of time. It needs a great courage. Look at, Arjuna. All his moral education had told him that Gandhiji has written, be non-violent. And somebody has written, don't shoot arrows at your own kith and kin. And suddenly, that moment of great unfolding, the psychic emerges. And amidst the dance of death, Arjuna receives the song of immortality. So psychic education is about that. In our context, simply reading Savitri, putting some nice music in the background, discussing with the child, what is your highest idea that you can conceive of? Let the child go into a flight of fantasy. He'll hit a jackpot one day. When he suddenly come up and say, my highest idea is love, and you will have an aha moment. You were thinking of what job he can do, and suddenly he makes you feel stupid and silly with all your job and achievements because the child has come up with something which far transcends. Then you share what is love. Now this is what, when we have such things and such stories, the psyche comes out. In the Indian context, I do believe that people, even now, children should be exposed to these beautiful things. Ramayana, the Mahabharata, Shabads, when they are sung in Gurudwara, even in, of course it has been corrupted, but some of these Sufi songs, when children are exposed to these things, mantras, prayer, this is our inheritance. And it's a psychic food. It has been provided to us. Thanks for, the originators. At least in India, it's available in all shapes, sizes, taste. It can cater to your taste. But it is missing nowadays. Many children, they don't even know. And, I see some of the discussions. Mahabharata, I don't believe that, monkeys could speak. This is the understanding. That Ramayana, the person who wrote for something which has endured for 10,000 years, was simply writing like, monkey is speaking, how is it possible? As if he is so foolish and we are so foolish as to believe that he was so foolish. So this is the lack of psychic food. So it gets stifled. Then the third thing which is required is, very often in life, what do we put forward as an aim? Aim is be happy, bourgeois ideal. Why should you study? When you study, you will get a good job. Why should I get you a good job? Then life will be cushy, you'll be comfortable. You'll have a lot of money. You'll have everything that you want because you can do everything with money. That advertisement, no? Most important things in life you cannot buy from money. Or for all the rest, there is MasterCard. So, but this is what we are not taught. We are given a lie. We give a lie to a child that this is what is going to fetch you things. So whereas we have to teach him something very interesting, and the mother speaks of her own example, that her own physical mother was like an iron lady. So every time she would say, sometimes I would say, little sulking attitude, she says, her mother would tell her, because she had conceived the child that, my children will be the best in the world. Same we see with Sri Aurobindo. That with regard to Sri Aurobindo, the father had an aspiration that my Auro, he will shine in the world. Somehow he had this intuitive sense. And with physical mother, she had this urge. So every time when she would see a little bit, she would say, what? But why? You are not born for these things. So from childhood, when we see both Sri Aurobindo and the mother, one thing which is common in their life is that they didn't live with the kind of material comforts. Even in UK, he speaks of that one year when he could hardly get money. In a day, they would have a saveloy and bread and a cup of tea because there was nothing else they could afford. Even in winter, they didn't have coat to wear. And we see mother wearing lacquered shoes because she couldn't change it and she would color it differently. Didn't have proper petticoats to wear. Now this idea went in a generation that, well, we have to struggle not for existence, but life is not just for seeking pleasure, for comfort. It's meant for something greater. Whereas now, providing comfort is all right, but sometimes all life is only about comfort. For everything there is comfort. So this is, idea must go that life is not meant for pleasure. But what they have to learn is, again, mother puts it very beautifully, do not do anything for the sake of pleasure, but take pleasure in all that you do. Such a simple saying. If work is given to you, take pleasure. Enjoy it. Fully be in it. It may not be something which, you may like to do. But the joy of doing something very well, it may be something as trivial as maybe, nothing is trivial, so I shouldn't give an example. But, children learn cycling at different stages, they learn different things. They play a game. So game is not for succeeding in a competition, but the joy of playing. At the end of the game, you feel so happy. You learn these values, sporting spirit. So nothing is done for the sake of pleasure, but one must take pleasure in all we do. Then another aspect that the mother says is that we have to always understand that there is a kind of identity that is determined for us by our birth, circumstances of our birth, etc. But there is something which goes beyond it, because psychic by its nature is born in different ages and climes in different countries. So one of the best ways to understand rebirth is, the fallout of rebirth is that we don't know. Maybe in previous lives we were born in different countries. It brings us a vastness. One of the things that helps psychic to develop is an atmosphere of vastness. This vastness is not to be mistaken with the wideness of the waste paper basket. Oh, I am very liberal. Liberal is different. I sit with my child and have alcohol at school. That's called the wideness of the waste paper basket. Vastness is something very different. Vastness is something where we go beyond limits of everything. We want to explore. There are no limits to exploring life, no limits to exploring truth, no limits to going beyond all the boundaries. This spirit of vastness, and we can inculcate it even through simple exercises. Give them images. They have forgotten to imagine. So give them an image through which they can enter into vastness. Let them learn to imagine. So these are many of the things which are missing, through which we can bring out this psychic impulsion. And then very importantly, the purpose. See, this was again inbuilt within us. We have forgotten it, but we can bring it in a different way. So there was the custom, as we grew up, at least in the Indian setting, that before food we used to pray. So now it is like when the food is served on the table, the first response is, the child will take out the tongue in a certain way. Yummy. Jump to it. So the child should be taught, wait, yummy, but before yummy, mummy. The great world mother. We must know before we are eating that how many beings have gone into making this little dish, this dish of rice, this lovely idli sambar. The farmer tilling the soil, the sun. At least few times let the child be aware that this is not just about yummy. It's about the labor of the stars has gone into making this. And then before we eat, just for a few moments, why are we eating? So we used to pray. Of course, we were never taught why we are praying. So mother brings in this beautiful element. She says, when you eat, pray that this food builds in us the health and all that is necessary for us to lead life, fitness and health and harmony. So we don't do it. So how are we trying to get into it? Through a back door, but not a good door. Again, okay, if I eat organic, if I eat cheese-free, if I don't eat milk, get into consciousness. It's not about what you are eating, it's the state of consciousness. You eat all the right organic stuff and all the time with fear in the mind. If I touch this, I'm going to fall sick. So you make a cult of organic. A fierce, almost ideological war. I have seen people get almost, activist like thing. So ultimately, what we are doing, we are making the mind again into a rigid, narrow vessel. It's okay. Eat whatever is served, as somebody deeply spiritual said something very nice. He said, I'm going out from one gaon to another. What should I do? He said, eat when you are hungry, sleep when you are sleep when you are sleepy, and drink when you are thirsty. He said, what is this advice? Anyways, Guruji has said. So he goes, then he wants to eat something. So he remembers, eat when you're hungry. So he waits. So he eats when he's hungry. Then he wants to, there is a nice, I want to be here. So he has sleep when you are sleepy. Then he discovered that there is something which is within us. And he discovered that the food when you eat when you're hungry is so tasty. So basically to discover our own internal rhythms and to tune and sink into that, it's completely lost. And it takes time to discover it, rediscover it. It is not to become rigid. We need to have a plasticity, but at the same time, before we eat, so she says, before we sleep, concentrate for a few moments. On what? She says that may the sleep restore us. So beautiful to sleep with this idea that may my sleep be full of peace, full of light, full of sweetness, full of joy. May I wake up fresh, rejuvenated. And then when the child wakes up, to wake up the child with a smile, good morning, welcome the day, it's so beautiful and bright. May you be beautiful and bright like this. How do we normally wake up? Alarm clock. Then not getting up. So already parents are beginning to fight. You spoil the child, you spoil the child. One of them has to own responsibility. See, he always gets late, doesn't wake up. We don't know how to wake up actually. So then at the end point, one of them is very angry. This is what your spoiled kid, all this, he gets up and the whole day. It's okay. Wake up the child with all that, beauty. It'll take some time, it'll take effort. And even if it doesn't, sometimes you have to say hurry up. It's okay. But the first words that should go into the ears of a child is something very beautiful. I mean, these are things, moments one remembers, they feed the soul. I remember waking up with my mom singing a bhajan, Chalo re sadhu aaj karenge Ganga snan. And I remember I used to be half awake. We want to sleep on, But these words were like magical ringing tone. They would go inside, and this went into me that, every day morning when I wake up, Ganges, the symbol of purity. I didn't understand all that at that age. So to wake up with this kind of a melodious something going on, this is what is missing, the psychic aspect. Why? Because we have flown into this ambition, career, and lost this psychic touch. So basically, every day, in all our interactions, in our reactions, all life is an education, so many opportunities we miss. So when child has a fight with, let's say, he has been humiliated, insulted, or the teacher is neglected, whatever it is, it's an opportunity to discuss with the child what should be our response. How should we deal with this? This itself can become a means to turn the tables around and bring out the soul, because there is a response of the ego and there is a response of the soul. So the ego's response is it is hurt, disappointed, develops a negative self-image. But the response of the soul is that my image does not depend upon somebody's approval. So what is my strength? What is my strength that I must discover? So again, every child should be to observe in the child the tendency that is beautiful and to bring it out. See how the mother would do. Not through, negative remarks, oh, you're no good, you're useless. Rather, every child carries something beautiful. To tell the child, share it with it. It's a genuine praise. That look, you're so beautiful. Every little gesture of self-giving, a gesture of gratitude, a gesture of prayer, and a child should be told that, it's something so beautiful. So if we start doing that, we'll see that over a period of time, throughout the day, more or less there will be a little psychic undercurrent of psychic stream running through life. And one day this stream will emerge into the foreground. This is the real life, not this surface life of achievements and all these outer things. Outer things will carry an importance only based on the inner thing. So we have again back to where we started from. Karna and Arjuna are both excellent warriors. But what differentiates the two? One knows the truth but cannot stand for it. That is Karna. He knows what is dharma, but he cannot stand for it. He lacks courage. He lacks the love of truth. He is taken over by the ambition to rule a kingdom and to be in the good books of the emperor to be. After all, Duryodhana is the crown prince. So he lacks that courage to follow his own deepest self. The Kshatriya dharma, which is to protect the righteous, to protect the oppressed. On the contrary, he is taking the side of, Duryodhana, knowing that he is an oppressive king. If he becomes an emperor, life would be chaotic. And yet he takes his side because in the name of, he covers it with nice things. Oh, he has been my friend and he has been very generous, so I have given a word and promise. All nonsense. All mental justifications. Therefore, Karna, despite being at least as good, let's presume, of course, I personally am biased towards Arjuna, but even if he is as good in terms of his inner life, he failed something. The true Kshatriya is not one who knows how to wield the bow and arrow. The true Kshatriya is somebody who has the Kshatriya bhav, that he'll protect the right, stand for the truth, be courageous in front of the world. Arjuna, knowing all the same things. In fact, if you really look at it, who is Arjuna's guru who taught him archery and all that? Dronacharya. Who is Dronacharya's guru? Parshuram. And Parshuram has taught Karna. So you can imagine, the same master who has taught Bhishma, that master has taught him. Well, he has been brought up by Dronacharya, who is a great archer, no doubt, but he has taught many of them. But Arjuna has one thing on his side. Arjuna knows dharma and has the courage to stand by it. This ability to stand for what is true with courage, this ability to stand for what we truly love, to declare it without fear, without hesitation, and to learn to love truly and to live truly, to express the inner truth of our life regardless of outer consequences, is what differentiates the ordinary man who is leading just the normal life, however successful he may be, from the extraordinary person who is here to express his own deeper truth in life, regardless of what it may fetch him or not fetch him. So this is the brief, quick background of the missing piece of the puzzle, the purpose of a life, and some little hints here and there. It's a long subject. At the same time, if we have to engage in it, we must know that we have to be equal to the task. We cannot teach what we don't know. If I have read from a book, I have seen people trying to teach psychic education as pointer 1, 2, 3, 4 blackboard. No, it doesn't work like that. It is, we have to have our own psychic awakening. We have to value it. It's not a subject, it is the subject. The subject is that. What we call as you, me, is that. The psychic being in us is the subject. It is not one of the subjects. Let's teach it. I'll have a class of psychic education. That is like moral education. Most boring. So, the psychic education is something which runs through life. It should be ingrained in the very fabric of our being. And who can do it? Somebody who is himself or herself engaged in this great discovery. And attitudes that help in that discovery must be inculcated, like calm, agitation, excitement, fretfulness, anger. They are not conducive to psychic discovery. So to learn to be calm, to learn to be patient, to learn to persevere, because this discovery is not that, okay, today I want to discover the psychic. After 1 month, say, do you think my psychic has stepped forward? Ask it after a lifetime. And when you know it, you don't need to ask it. That's the beauty. So this patience, perseverance, this will to discover, the will that differentiates between what is good and what is only pleasant, shreyas and preyas. All this should be part of our education. And where is that good? Last but not the least, it is here in the heart. Nobody has to tell us. From childhood, ask the child. When a child does something, spontaneously ask, what do you feel here? And if there is no fear, the child will say. If there is fear, then the child will start covering up. No, no, I did this because of this. There is nothing like because of this. Ask the child, what do you feel here? Are you comfortable here in your heart? Many children I have seen, they will maybe initially they may say something, but afterwards also they have come and said, I'm sorry, I did something which I shouldn't have done, because you children feel it. But grown-ups, they will mind games, my God. So mind games is a different thing altogether. But children can be brought up like that. The sign that there is something which is true and good and beautiful, Satyam Shivam Sundaram, which is what the psychic feels, is here. And this is what they must learn to contemplate, connect with. This is the last piece of the puzzle. It is deep within our heart, the key to all other aspects of our being, the key to the ultimate mystery. It is the psychic being within us. Thank you.
So, always with your talks, we have a lot of questions. So, I have one question, which is again something related to what you said about Swadharma. So, a person who does not take responsibility, can his or her basic nature be changed?
Okay, so the question is, somebody who doesn't take responsibility, can his or her nature be changed? Nature can be changed. Let's start with that. Nature can be changed. But there is a big but. And the but is that the person whose nature has to be changed must want it to change. Now, without the help of the individual's will, it can happen, but it's very rare. That's like a grace which came to Jagai and Madhai, which came to Anguli Mal, which came to Ratnakar. Now that can happen. It's not that it cannot happen. But generally speaking, the person must want it. So the first step is to make the will on the side of change. So one has to, if we feel that this is an attitude in the person, like with alcoholics and others, we have to first win back their will. Then the faith that it can change. Then the rest can follow. So the will must be awakened. The need for change must come. If the need for change is there, nature can be changed. So and there are of course many steps and processes. It can be done very rationally. That look, when you don't assume responsibility, you yourself are a slave, because then you are at the mercy of 100 things. So appeal to those little things. Like for instance, a person wants freedom. Now, appeal to that instinct for freedom in a human being, that if you really want to be free, assume responsibility. Somebody who doesn't assume responsibility and always blaming someone or the other outside, then what happens with that? You are always at the mercy of someone else. So true autonomy and freedom come when we assume responsibility. Then this other aspect, that whatever we have done, the choices we have made, we should be courageous to accept the consequences. Something we learn from the story of Yudhishthira. They have lost the game of dice. I am 100% sure if it was the Duryodhana side, if they lost the game of dice by whatever means, they would have never gone to the forest. They would have picked up bows and arrows and said, let's have a fight. But Yudhishthira assumes responsibility for his choices. And that's what makes him great even in the fall. So even when we fall, when we take responsibility, instead of blaming others, it's the sign of a greatness. We are marked for something stupendous. So this thing also should be brought out in children and grown-ups, that whatever happens in my life, I am responsible for it. Whatever circumstances, situations, I may find myself in it. The mother says in psychic education only something very beautiful, that all our circumstances are a clumsy attempt to reproduce something which is within us. So when we assume responsibility, that it's not circumstances that are shaping me, it is me who is determining them without knowing the link, then life begins to change and we begin to change. So if you want to change circumstance, change within. So this is how the process goes. Yes.
Though you have just answered this question, but I would like to pose this question again.
Yes.
This question is that why is it that people who are closest to you hurt you the most? How to work on oneself not to get hurt?
Yes, wonderful. People who are closest to us hurt us most, precisely because they are closest to us. So what happens when we are close to someone is we get attached. Close means here that we are attached to them. Now when we are attached to somebody, we become very vulnerable. Everything spoken, not spoken, every little word, we become very sensitive to that because we have attached ourselves. So, the conventional solution that is advised is detachment. But there are two kinds of detachment. One is a detachment which turns away from the world, regarding everything as an illusion. But there is another kind of detachment which is a healthy detachment. You do what we have to do it because that's the thing to be done, but don't be attached in this sense that, that person starts indirectly controlling my behavior. So, this is one part of it. But there is something else apart from detachment. And it is that when we live life, that this is what I am meant to be, and I live it as a stream flows. Now, some people drink the stream and say, wow, sweet stream. Some drink and say it is not so good. Doesn't matter. It's the nature of the stream to flow, and it will flow. It's the nature of the flower to bloom, and it will bloom. It doesn't care whether somebody appreciates it or not. So this thing which must be awakened in us, I mean children and everything, that I have to lead my life not because somebody else appreciates it. See, this need for appreciation comes from there. So when it doesn't come or we are criticized, we get hurt. So, but I have to lead my life because this is what I am meant to be. That's what I meant by the purpose. And that when we lead our life like that, then it doesn't matter. It needs time, it needs a training. And most importantly, we have to remember that after all, opinions of human beings, well, somebody has to be infallible. Expecting, it's like, I give this example. You go to a market in search of a diamond, and you go to a, kirane ka dukan and say, Bhaiya, diamond hai. He will look at you and feel you are a foolish person. So he'll pick up the paperweight and he'll say, हाँ है. Kitne ka hai? 1,000 rupees. Oh, that cheap. I heard it comes very costly. No, sir, I'll give you. He has passed you a thing which is worthless. A piece of glass for a, petty price. So we must know where we'll find what. So when we turn towards human beings and expect them to give us love, then we are basically, human beings are deprived creatures, helpless creatures. They don't have love inside. They're themselves running, give me little love, give me little love. How can they give love? They cannot make us happy because, they are themselves don't have the happiness within. So for us, we have to first tap that source of infinite love and bliss, which is within, which is the divine. And we receive everything from the divine. Then we give. Then even if we are attached, we have the great cushion, the divine love. If we are attached, momentarily it will touch us. But immediately we'll say, oh, and we'll smile and it'll be done. So turn to the divine for all our needs, and for the rest, it's part of the world play. Those who cannot receive wounds are not good to become healers. Okay, so it gives us wisdom. Wounds make us wiser and stronger. Yes.
So beautiful. So, another question is from the junior school is Shivani's question is how can we touch the psychic being in a young child? What are the ways we can do it in a school?
So this is what I was basically discussing. In a young child, actually it is far more easier, incidentally. In a young child, it's much easier to touch the psychic being than in a grown-up adult. Because grown-up adult, if you talk about psychic being, he'll first ask us the spelling, then ask us the definition, then quote all the Ramayana, Puranas, and does it mean, is it what is called in Vedanta or Upanishad? He will, by the time you have 1 hour you have spent, his psychic being has become a mental image of something. But in children, it is spontaneous. Teach children to be quiet, teach them not to be, agitated over everything. Teach them that there is something to be discovered. Teach them what is their highest idea or ideal before them. Teach them about love. Teach them about truth. Teach them to discover what they are meant to be. It should be like breathing. Teach them to sit quiet and pray. To whom? To whatever highest and greatest conception they can imagine. So when we teach them like that, then slowly, and of course the teacher himself must be in that state. So there should be a class of quietude when we decide. It may be handful. We need not have all the students in that class. See, this is where the problem comes. Pick up children that there will be a time when we will stay quiet and we'll spontaneously interact and come up with some, we'll just engage in some discovery, a class of self-discovery. Let's put it like that. Maybe 10 students will raise their hands, take them up aside and put them in that kind of, education system. So in the ashram, that's what was meant by free progress. So when mother was asked to define free progress, she said progress guided by the soul. It's actually literally Swadharma. So now in the modern context, in every school, even in a mainstream school, there should be scope and a time given wherein some children in whom the urge for progress has become conscious enough. See, the difference between seeking pleasure and seeking progress, children should know, and they want to progress. Really, they want to discover something more beautiful. They want to know what is beyond the book and the framework. So, in them, there should be some kind of arrangement. I don't know how it will be possible, but I presume, let's say, a separate, not a section, maybe a section, maybe a separate timing when these children can be put there, and the educator, facilitator has to be somebody who is awakened. So they can go, refer to that, talk to that, person, and grow inwardly in the psychic being. It cannot be done in a typical classroom that all 35 students, I'm going to talk about the psychic being, about moral values. It cannot be imparted through this kind of a didactic lectures and even dialogues. It cannot be done like that. It has to be the right atmosphere. In a classroom, we can at the most do stories which can touch the soul, like stories of courage, of valor, of love, of truth. So they touch the psychic, but indirectly. They are also good. So there should be a story time when we talk about a story and about these characters. Like, fantastic Shiva's story. How a mendicant is regarded as the ultimate god who can give anything and everything. The great renunciate, and yet he is a grahast, the mightiest of mighty. Look at Krishna on the other hand, the ruler of the worlds. He sports in the car, chariot, he rules a kingdom, and yet he is the greatest of the great. So this idea that, what is true greatness, what is, true unfolding. So through these stories of valor, Abhimanyu's story, what a valor at a young age. And we can do it in many modern stories. So one has to pick out these stories, which I often see at one point I used to notice, this story is so, today there was a little news item that plants listen to you. So, these little things where they discover the sense of oneness of creation. That when you enter into your kitchen, the plants are listening to you. So, these kind of stories should be shared with children, and slowly they will begin to understand that there is something more to life than my job, career, and money. Yeah.
So there is something in continuation to this. Another question is that if a child's psychic being is at an early stage of evolutionary growth, which does get reflected many a time, what should be done to aid its growth? Of course, not a report card as a progress report.
Involve the parents to start with. They are the ones who will create a problem. They will say, we didn't send the child for psychic discovery. Don't make him a psychic. That's what they will think. Engage the parents. Whatever you may do will be undone, for sure. So engage the parents, that's number one. Second, as I've been saying that, again, the story time and all these are means to develop. Basically, they must know that there is much more to this life than meets the eye, than the typical career choices. This sense of a wonderful discovery which we are here to make, they must feel that enthusiasm. See, that is what is missing. When it is taught like a dull, dry subject, like, okay, today we will pray. So everybody sits, close your eyes. Now we are going to pray. Which prayer? So somebody starts mechanically and the children are half sleepy. Somebody is watching with the corner of the eyes. When this is going to finish? Another child is playing a prank. It's not that. It should be the joyous enthusiasm. So who can do it? Somebody who is inside carrying that. Teach them about gratitude. Gratitude, enthusiasm, urge for progress are spontaneous manifestation of the psychic. Teach them about courage, even through games and camps. You see, many of these adventure camps. In fact, one of the moments when psychic comes out is when it confronts the enigma of death. That is one of the things beautiful about the Gita. So, either during when somebody dies or when they have visited, that time it can be, because they are intensely moved. Children don't know what it means. It can completely shatter their world, because death, okay, nothing is permanent. The first thing they think is, what if my parents die? Because they have not yet formed their identity. So what if my parents die? then they wonder, what, you can die, it can be very frightening. So, discuss with them that no, everything doesn't die. There is something which remains and something which beautifully grows. So all this idea that beyond the form there is something which survives. So every experience of life can be made a ground, breeding ground to bring out the psychic. So there should be a time when they just discuss experiences. Like it may start with, what did you have for breakfast? So what happened during that time? I was in a hurry, mom shouted. So, how to handle all these things. So, but it will require really a very conscious parenting, and of course, in the classroom also, a lot of time and consciousness has to go into it. Yes.
So again, one more related question.
Yes.
It is believed that a soul chooses its earthly experiences such as parents, country, etc. Then why do we find some children struggle and suffer as their swabhav and swadharma are not understood by their parents?
Yes.
How should such children be helped if as a teacher we have been able to understand him better but are not able to make his parents understand, because that's a constant tussle between the teacher and the...
So this question has two aspects of it, that the soul choosing its environment. And what, long back I had read a very nice phrase. So when we speak about choosing the environment, we think everything which is comfortable. Now when we use the word helps, we think everybody will understand. But very often, as somebody said very beautifully, that the most beautiful crystals are shaped when they face the entire, when the sea hits little pebble on the, on all its surfaces, at the end it leaves is beautiful. So very often when there is opposition and misunderstanding, paradoxically it can catalyze us to outgrow that little aspect of my parents, my life, my custom, and actually become a great help. But that's where the role of educators come in. That sometimes it's a beautiful opportunity to outgrow the limitations. I have seen children whose parents are constantly opposing them have a much greater chance actually of discovering what they want to do eventually than those where parents are deciding and determining what to do, and they are like henpecked parents who are all the time interfering. So it can work both ways. So the task of the educator is to turn every experience, seemingly good or seemingly bad, into a means of this discovery, and that requires a knack. So parents, well, if they understand it, wonderful. But let's say they don't, doesn't matter. So we have to turn that into a means for self-discovery. So everything actually, every experience. I mean, I face this every time during counseling. So people come, they are going through a difficult phase. So it is a means to discover something about ourselves, whether it be relationships, issue with parents, husband, wife. So everything can become a catalyst for that. Yes.
So with this insightful start in this new year and the mantra of knowing the heart, my gratitude to Alok Bhai for giving us a direction. So I will not say thanks because last time you said no. So my gratitude from the entire school family.
Thank you.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.